On the morning she planned to celebrate her husband's birthday, Camille Rhodes heard her own name, followed by laughter that ended her marriage before she even walked into the room. The mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut shimmered like a cathedral of privilege that morning. Crystal glasses caught the light, lilies perfumed the air, and a Rolex watch waited inside a velvet box, a perfect gift for the perfect husband. Camille Rhodes, 42, descended the staircase with poise that had taken a lifetime to master. Her silk dress whispered with every step. She carried an envelope proof of a $100,000 donation made in her husband's name, a gesture of loyalty, of love, of belief. Then she heard him. From the parlor came the sound of a voice she knew better than her own. Gavin Sterling, her husband, the rising political star, the man who kissed her in public and ignored her in private. His tone was relaxed, careless, edged with arrogance. "That cow disgusts me, Mom. I only care about her money. What did you think that I actually like touching her?" Camille stopped breathing, her pulse turned to ice. His mother, Margaret Sterling, responded with the same calm cruelty she used to stir sugar into her tea. "Then pretend, Gavin. Keep her smiling until you own it all. After that, let her go. No one keeps a trophy forever." They laughed. A light, elegant laughter, the kind that only the powerful can afford. The envelope slipped from Camille's hand and fell silently to the carpet. She didn't move, she didn't cry. She watched the morning sunlight slide across the floor like a blade. Then, slowly, she turned and climbed the stairs back up, her body perfectly still while her world burned inside. In the mirror, the woman staring back at her looked flawless, skin smooth, pearls shining, eyes dry. But beneath that calm, she felt something shift, a quiet, irreversible click. A lock opening. That evening, the dinner unfolded with perfect decorum. The chandelier glowed, the wine sparkled. Gavin kissed her cheek for the cameras. "Happy birthday, darling," she said, her smile steady. Margaret's toast followed a performance of sophistication. "To Gavin," she said sweetly, "and to the woman who keeps him looking good." Laughter again. Camille lifted her glass. Her hand didn't shake. But in her mind, the decision was already made. After midnight, she moved barefoot through the silent mansion. Her fingers trailed across portraits, tables, chandeliers, all the symbols of a life built on deception. Every surface whispered, "You've given enough." In Gavin's office, she sat down and wrote on a single sheet of paper. "Thanks for showing your true colors." 3 lines, no signature, no explanation. Then she opened her laptop. She'd spent years managing her family's estate, every transaction, every trust fund, every secret account. It took her less than an hour to make it disappear. With a few keystrokes, the fortune moved from New York to a Swiss account under a new name. By dawn, Camille had packed a small black backpack passport, cash, a coat, and one photograph of herself at 18, standing on a beach in South Carolina, her hair wild and her smile untamed. At 4:57 a.m., she walked out. The servants slept. The security cameras flickered off a timed glitch she had planned days ago, back when she still hoped she'd never need it. The iron gate creaked open, and the cold air hit her face like baptism water. Behind her, the house stood silent, unaware it was losing its captive. 2 hours later, Gavin woke to find her side of the bed empty. He searched the halls, the kitchen, the terrace. He found the note on the pillow. "Thanks for showing your true colors." He smirked, dismissive. "Dramatic," he muttered. "She'll come back." But when he opened his laptop to check his accounts, his confidence cracked. 0, empty. He called his banker disconnected. He called his lawyer unavailable. Margaret arrived, pearls rattling, face pale. "Where is she?" "She left," Gavin said through gritted teeth. "Left me a damn note." "Then find her," Margaret hissed, "before someone else does." Outside, the media had already caught the scent. "Senatorial candidate's wife missing," the headlines screamed. "Police suspect scandal or abduction." But Camille was neither a victim nor a fugitive. She was a woman reborn sitting on a city bus heading toward South Chicago, wearing a gray coat, her wedding ring gone. No one looked at her. No one cared who she was. She pressed her forehead against the window as dawn broke over the skyline. The city ahead was rough, cracked, alive, nothing like the sterile perfection she'd left behind. For the first time in years, Camille Rhodes breathed like a free woman. Still, as the bus rumbled deeper into the city, the question clawed its way into her thoughts, sharp and unrelenting. What happens when the man who built his empire on your silence starts to lose everything you took away? The bus rattled like a restless heartbeat as it rolled across the state line. Camille Rhodes sat by the window, hands folded over a worn backpack, the faint reflection of her face hovering over the passing scenery towns that blurred into a haze of muted colors and unfamiliar sounds. The cold glass pressed against her forehead like an anchor. She didn't know exactly where she was going, only that every mile between her and Greenwich felt like a small resurrection. When the skyline of Chicago appeared, gray and serrated against the winter sky, Camille inhaled sharply. The city looked nothing like the polished photographs in magazines. It was alive in ways the Sterling's marble mansion had never been. Smoke coiled from rooftops, buses groaned at every stop, and strangers moved with purpose instead of performance. The bus hissed to a stop, doors folding open with a mechanical sigh. Camille stepped into the crisp air and felt the ground of anonymity under her feet. No one turned to look at her. No one knew her name. No one expected her to smile. Her heels clicked against the wet pavement until she reached a small diner near the terminal. Inside, she sat at a corner booth, ordered black coffee, and unfolded a city map. The waitress didn't recognize her face from any charity gala or political campaign. The coffee was bitter, the air thick with grease and conversation, and for the first time in years, Camille didn't have to perform gratitude. When she asked about cheap rooms, the waitress scribbled an address on a napkin and said, "South Side. It's rough, but no one will bother you if you mind your business." An hour later, Camille stood in front of a small house with faded green paint and iron bars on the windows. A piece of paper taped to the gate read, "Room for rent, shared bath, no questions asked." She hesitated for only a moment before knocking. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 60s, dark skin, eyes like sharp marbles behind thick lashes, a face carved by years of fatigue and wisdom. "You look lost," she said without judgment. "I saw your sign," Camille replied quietly. "I need a place for a while." "Name?" the woman asked, crossing her arms. Camille paused, then let a new identity roll off her tongue. "Maya Rhodes." The woman squinted. "Maya, huh? I'm Ruth Delaney. Rent's up front. I don't do refunds. You make noise, you're out. You lie, I'll know." "I understand," Camille said, handing her a folded stack of bills. Ruth looked at her for a beat longer before nodding toward the narrow hallway. "Third door on the left, bathrooms down the hall. Don't leave food out, rats'll throw a party." The room smelled faintly of bleach and rain, a small bed, cracked dresser, a window that didn't close all the way. To Camille, it felt like freedom disguised as confinement. She placed her bag on the bed, sat down, and exhaled. No marble floors, no chandeliers, no husband rehearsing his next lie, just silence, pure, honest silence. That night she didn't cry. She just lay awake, listening to the hum of the city. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. A dog barked, then quiet. She drifted to sleep as the first snow began to fall outside, erasing footprints she hadn't realized she'd left behind. Back in Greenwich, Gavin Sterling's life was unraveling at the speed of rumor. Reporters crowded outside the mansion gates, their camera flashes turning the morning fog into a frenzy of white light. "Senator Sterling, did your wife run away? Is it true she transferred millions before she vanished?" He slammed the door shut and poured a drink even though it wasn't yet 10 in the morning. Margaret entered, pearls swaying against her neck, her voice cold and sharp. "You should have handled this before it became a headline." He spun toward her. "She left, Mother. Took everything, the accounts, the house, the cars. She even left a note like some damn movie scene." "What did it say?" He tossed the crumpled paper onto the desk. "Thanks for showing your true colors." Margaret smoothed the page with trembling fingers. "Maybe you finally showed them." Gavin's jaw clenched. "Don't start. She's not smart enough to pull this off alone. Someone's helping her." Margaret's expression barely shifted. "Maybe she learned by watching you." He grabbed his phone. "I'm not losing to her." "Gavin," she said softly, but he'd already dialed a number. "Frank Daly. I need you to find someone discreetly." Meanwhile, in South Chicago, Camille was learning to disappear. Days turned into quiet routines, coffee from the corner store, walks through cracked sidewalks, afternoons spent watching children play soccer between apartment buildings. The people here didn't look away from struggle, they carried it openly, like weathered coats. She envied them. At a small grocery one morning, she overheard two women talking about a community clinic nearby. "They'll take you even if you can't pay," one said. "Doctor, there's got a heart but no budget." The next day, Camille founded a squat brick building with peeling paint and a fading sign that read South Shore Community Health Center. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and exhaustion. Children coughed, women filled out forms, a nurse sorted through medicine bottles with shaky hands. Behind a curtain, a man's voice broke through the noise low, steady, compassionate. "Tell her to keep the wound clean. Come back next week, we'll figure something out." When he stepped into view, Camille froze. He wasn't what she expected. Tall, rugged, maybe late 30s, sleeves rolled up, dark circles under kind eyes. "Are you the doctor?" she asked quietly. He looked up, startled for a moment, then nodded. "Dr. Elijah Vance, you need medical help." "No," she said quickly. "I came to volunteer. I have experience managing organizations, donations, logistics. Maybe I could help." Elijah studied her for a few seconds. Her posture was too straight, her tone too precise. She didn't belong here, and he knew it. But something in her eyes, a mix of weariness and defiance, softened him. "Sure," he said finally. "We don't pay much, but we don't turn away help either." "I'm not here for money," she replied. "Then you'll fit right in," he said, handing her a clipboard. "Welcome to South Shore, miss?" "Maya," she said again, almost believing it this time. The first week passed in blur. Camille cleaned examination rooms, organized expired medicine, sorted paperwork by candlelight when the power flickered out. She didn't speak of her past. No one asked. Every evening, she returned to her tiny room, her hands aching, her mind strangely at peace. But the news she'd escaped couldn't be contained forever. In Greenwich, the scandal spread like gasoline fire. A journalist leaked bank documents, evidence of campaign funds redirected through the Rhodes family trust. The headlines turned savage. "Sterling finances under federal review." Gavin's picture filled every screen. His smile looked thinner by the day. "She's framing me," he growled to Margaret. "She planned this." Margaret's voice cracked. "Or maybe she finally stopped letting you plan her life." He turned, eyes dark. "She won't win." In Chicago, snow piled higher each night. The clinic's heater broke, and Camille stayed late, folding blankets for the patients. Elijah appeared beside her with a box of donated clothes. "You don't have to stay," he said. "I can't sleep when it's too quiet," she replied, forcing a small smile. He leaned against the counter, watching her in the flicker of candlelight. "You remind me of someone who used to believe she could fix everything." "Did she?" He hesitated. "She died trying." Camille looked away. "Maybe that's still better than living pretending everything's fine." He nodded slowly, not pressing further. They worked side by side until dawn, and when she left, she realized she hadn't thought about Gavin for hours. But Gavin hadn't stopped thinking about her. One night, Frank Daly called him. "Got something, a sighting in Chicago, South Side, matches her description." Gavin's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Send me the address." Margaret's voice trembled when she overheard. "Let her go, Gavin. Haven't you done enough?" "She's still my wife," he snapped. "And everything she took, it's mine." "No," Margaret whispered, tears forming. "She stopped being yours the moment you laughed at her." He didn't answer. He was already gone. Camille woke to the sound of traffic one morning and dressed quickly for another day at the clinic. The streets were glazed with ice. Her breath hung in the air as she walked. Inside the waiting room, she noticed a black SUV parked across the street-tinted windows, polished metal, a ghost from her old world. Her stomach dropped. She forced herself to keep moving, to smile at patients, to answer questions, but her pulse drummed against her throat like a trapped bird. "Everything all right?" Elijah asked, noticing her pallor. "Yes," she said too quickly. "Just didn't sleep much." He didn't believe her, but said nothing. When he turned away, she slipped quietly out the back door, her boots crunching over snow. The wind cut her face as she moved through the alley, ducking behind dumpsters and broken fences until the streets blurred together. By the time she stopped, her hands were trembling uncontrollably. She leaned against a brick wall and exhaled white smoke into the frozen air. He had found her. Maybe not yet, not directly. but he was close. Running was no longer safety, it was delay. That night, she sat at the small table in her room, staring at the cracked mirror. The reflection that stared back wasn't Camille Rhodes, socialite wife. It wasn't even Maya Rhodes, the woman learning to start over. It was someone in between, stripped, cautious, alive. She whispered to her reflection, "You wanted to be free." Freedom means facing the storm, not hiding from it. Her eyes hardened. Outside, the first flakes of snow began to fall again, soft as ashes. Back in Greenwich, Gavin received another message, target confirmed, South Chicago, community clinic. He smiled, slow and dangerous. Finally, he muttered, pouring himself another drink. Time to bring her home. He didn't know that home was the last place she'd ever go again. That same night, Camille heard footsteps outside her window. At first, she thought it was the wind. Then a knock, 3 slow taps, she froze. Another knock, this time firmer. She grabbed her coat but didn't open the door. A small voice floated through the wood, trembling but familiar. "Miss Maya? It's Amara. Grandma said you left your notebook at the clinic." Camille's breath caught. She unlocked the door halfway and stopped. The hallway was empty. Only her notebook lay on the floor, neatly placed, and beside it a folded photograph of her and Gavin, clipped from an old magazine, her face circled in red ink. The notebook slipped from her hands. The morning after the knock, Camille Rhodes didn't open her eyes right away. For a moment, she let herself pretend it had been a dream, that the photograph on the floor, the one with her face circled in red ink, had never existed. But when she finally sat up, the evidence of her past was still there, staring back at her from the nightstand. The air in the room felt heavy, colder than usual, as if even the walls were holding their breath. She got dressed mechanically, sliding the torn photograph into the drawer beside her bed. It didn't matter if Gavin had found her. What mattered was what she would do next. She couldn't keep running. Not forever. Outside, the city was waking up under a blanket of gray snow. The streets of South Chicago pulsed with life buses, children in worn coats, vendors lighting small fires in metal barrels. The normalcy of it all grounded her. She wasn't Mrs. Sterling here. She wasn't anyone. Just Maya Rhodes, another face among thousands. Still, she felt eyes on her. At the corner near the clinic, a man leaned against a lamppost reading a newspaper, but his stance was too still, too patient. Camille crossed the street, pretending not to notice, but the prickle down her neck wouldn't leave. Inside the clinic, the chaos of the morning rush swallowed her thoughts. Mothers with crying babies, elderly men coughing, teenagers limping in with bruises. Elijah Vance moved through the crowd like an exhausted guardian angel, his voice steady, his hands quick. "You're late," he said, glancing up from a chart. "I didn't sleep well," she admitted, setting her bag down. He studied her for a moment longer than necessary. "You look like someone who saw a ghost." "Maybe I did." Elijah tilted his head, concern flickering across his face. "You want to talk about it?" "No," she said firmly, then softened. "Not yet." He nodded, not pressing her further. That was something she'd come to respect about him. He understood the value of silence. The day passed in a blur of motion. By afternoon, the clinic smelled of bleach and sweat. Camille worked the front desk, logging supplies, handing out painkillers, calling pharmacies that never answered. The heater sputtered again, spitting cold air into the room. Around 6 p.m., when the last patient had left, Elijah found her sitting on the floor behind the counter, rubbing her temples. "You know," he said quietly, "you don't have to keep saving everyone." She looked up. "If I stop, I'll start thinking, and I can't afford that." He smiled sadly. "You sound like me 10 years ago." Camille hesitated, then asked, "What happened 10 years ago?" "My wife died," he said simply. "Hospital malpractice. They made it disappear, and I helped them because I needed the job. I told myself I'd expose them later. But later never came." His voice cracked, barely audible. "So now I'm here, trying to make it mean something." For a long time, neither spoke. The flickering fluorescent light above them buzzed faintly. Camille wanted to reach for his hand, to tell him she understood what it meant to be swallowed by guilt. Instead, she whispered, "Maybe we both ran to the same place." He looked at her, eyes soft. "Maybe we did." That night, the snow returned, heavier than before. The streets glittered under lamplight. Camille walked back to her rented room, her boots crunching against ice. Every window she passed reflected fragments of her part shadow, part woman, part survivor. When she reached the house, Ruth Delaney was sitting by the kitchen table, peeling potatoes with the radio humming old blues songs. "You're late," Ruth said without looking up. "Busy day." Ruth sliced another potato cleanly in half. "You've been jumpy lately, eyes on the door, checking the window twice. You hiding from someone, child?" Camille froze. "No, just habit." Ruth's gaze lifted slowly. "Habit comes from fear. Fear means you've seen something worth remembering." Camille forced a smile. "Maybe I'm just not used to quiet." Ruth didn't answer. She simply nodded toward the pot on the stove. "Eat, you'll need your strength." Camille ate in silence, the soup warm but tasteless. She could feel Ruth's intuition circling her like smoke. The older woman didn't ask again, but her eyes said everything. "I know you're not who you say you are, but I also know what pain looks like." Later in her room, Camille sat at her small desk, staring at her notebook. She flipped through pages filled with notes, sketches, and phrases ideas she'd scribbled in half-conscious bursts over the past weeks. At the bottom of one page she'd written, "Build something that outlives the lies." She underlined it twice. 2 miles away, the black SUV idled on a corner. Inside, a man in a leather jacket scrolled through surveillance photos, blurry shots of Camille entering the clinic, leaving the grocery store, walking in the snow. He tapped a message into his phone. "She's here, you were right." A reply came seconds later. "Do not approach yet. Wait for confirmation." The man smirked, snapping a photo through the windshield. In the dim light, Camille's figure appeared small and solitary, walking under a flickering street lamp. He sent the image. "You sure you just want to scare her?" No response. But across the country, in a penthouse office in D.C., Gavin Sterling stared at that photo and felt something primal twist inside him. He wanted her back not because of love, but because she'd humiliated him, and humiliation was the one wound his ego couldn't heal. He poured another drink, his reflection in the glass fractured by city lights. "You wanted to run," he murmured, "but I taught you how to live in a cage. Let's see how long you last without it." The next morning, Camille arrived early at the clinic. Elijah was already there, sleeves rolled up, arguing quietly with a supplier on the phone. "No, I don't care about the discount," he said sharply. "We need antibiotics now, not next week." Camille watched him from the doorway, the exhaustion in his voice, the quiet fire in his eyes. He reminded her of someone who had once believed people could be saved through kindness. Herself, maybe, before everything turned into calculation and pretense. When he hung up, he turned to her. "We're almost out of amoxicillin, and Lena's coming in today for another test." "Lena?" The little girl with the fever, her blood work came back abnormal. Camille's throat tightened. "How bad?" "Bad," he admitted. "We'll need to send her to a specialist, but the system's stacked against kids like her. They'll wait until it's too late." Camille glanced toward the waiting room, where Lena sat swinging her legs, her doll clutched tight. The girl looked up and smiled, and something in Camille's chest cracked. She spent the rest of the morning helping Lena draw pictures on old paper forms: a house, a sun, a woman with long hair standing beside a small child. "That's you," Lena said proudly. Camille blinked. "Me?" "Yeah, you're the one who always listens." No one had ever called her that before. That evening, Elijah found Camille again, this time sitting alone in the storage room. The air smelled of disinfectant and dust. "I've been thinking," she said without turning around, "this clinic could do more. If we had better funding, donors, volunteers, even partnerships, we could expand, turn it into something permanent." He leaned against the doorframe. "You talk like someone who's done this before." Camille smiled faintly. "I used to write checks. Now I want to build something." "From what?" he asked gently. She turned to face him. "From nothing. Isn't that where everything real begins?" Their eyes met. For a moment, the air between them softened, heavy with understanding, maybe something deeper. Then Elijah said, "If you ever decide to tell me what you're really running from, I'll still be here." "I know," she whispered. Across town, Frank Daly sat in a cheap motel room, laptop open. On the screen, security footage from the clinic played in slow motion. He zoomed in on a frame, Camille handing out medical supplies, her hair tied back, her expression calm. He opened another window, missing persons, Camille Rhodes, Sterling. He compared the faces, same eyes, same quiet defiance. He picked up his phone. "Mr. Sterling," he said, "I found your wife. But if you're planning something stupid, you'd better tell me now." Gavin's voice on the other end was smooth as ice. "You just keep eyes on her. I'll handle the rest." Night fell fast that evening, swallowing the city in black and blue hues. Camille lingered outside the clinic, watching as Elijah locked up. Snowflakes gathered in her hair, melting against her skin. "You should get home," he said softly. "I don't really have one," she replied. He hesitated, then said, "You do here. With us." Her lips parted, but before she could speak, headlights swept across the street. A black SUV slowed near the curb, engine idling. Elijah noticed her tense immediately. "Maya?" "It's nothing," she said quickly, backing away. "I'll see you tomorrow." But as she turned the corner, the SUV crept forward, tires crunching softly over snow. She ducked into an alley, her heart hammering. The vehicle paused, then drove off. She waited in the shadows for a full 5 minutes before stepping out. When she finally reached her room, her hands were numb, her pulse ragged. She closed the curtains, double-locked the door, and sat on the bed trembling. The photograph from before still lay in the drawer, but now it didn't scare her, it enraged her. She opened her notebook and wrote 3 words in thick, deliberate ink. "He found me." Then below it, "He won't again." Her mind raced. She couldn't just keep hiding. If Gavin wanted a fight, she would give him one, not with weapons or money but with truth, the truth he'd built his empire on silencing. And to do that she would need help, Elijah's help. She packed her things into the backpack, leaving behind everything she couldn't carry, including the fear. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the snowy street below. For the first time, she didn't feel like prey. She felt awake. The air in the clinic turned heavy the instant the door handle moved. For a heartbeat, everything stood still, the hum of the heater, the rustle of papers, even the dust caught in the light seemed to freeze. Camille's pulse thundered in her ears. She wanted to run, but her legs felt carved from stone. Elijah's hand brushed her arm steady, grounding. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The door opened. A tall man stepped inside, wrapped in a dark wool coat. Snowflakes clung to his shoulders, melting into the fabric. His expression was the same one Camille had seen 1,000 times at dinners, fundraisers, photo ops, calm, confident, predatory. "Camille," Gavin Sterling said, as if her name still belonged to him. Her heart seized. It had been weeks since she'd heard his voice, and yet it carried the same venom wrapped in silk. He looked thinner, his eyes ringed with sleeplessness, but the arrogance was untouched. Elijah's gaze flicked between them. "Sir, you can't just walk in here, this is a medical facility." Gavin smiled faintly. "Then maybe you can help me. My wife's sick. She seems to think she can disappear from her life." "I'm not your wife," Camille said quietly. The words trembled, but didn't break. Gavin turned to her, that politician's smirk sliding into place. "You've lost weight," he said. "The city suits you." "Leave," Elijah said, stepping forward. "Or what?" Gavin asked. "You'll call the police. They won't do a thing. She's legally my spouse. Everything she owns, including what she stole, still has my name on it." Camille's voice hardened. "I didn't steal anything. I took what was mine before you could rot it with your lies." Something dark flickered in his eyes. He stepped closer, ignoring Elijah. "You think this little rebellion makes you powerful? You're nothing without me. You never were." Camille flinched not from fear, but from fury. The room tilted around her, her hands curling into fists. She could smell his cologne, expensive and artificial, the same scent that once meant safety and now meant prison. "Get out," Elijah said again, his tone sharp this time, "or I will call the cops." Gavin's gaze shifted toward him. "Ah, the doctor. I should have guessed. She always had a weakness for saviors." Elijah didn't move, but his jaw tightened. "You're trespassing," he said. Gavin laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You think this place protects her? The woman standing behind you is the wife of a man running for Senate. You're harboring her. That's obstruction, maybe even kidnapping if I feel generous with the law." Camille stepped out from behind Elijah. "Enough, Gavin." He turned toward her, voice dropping to a near whisper. "You can come home now, Camille. End this circus before it gets worse. You don't want to destroy both of us." "There is no us," she said. "There never was." For the first time, he faltered just a flicker, a shadow of confusion. "You're making a mistake." "No," she said, eyes locked on his. "I'm correcting one." The silence stretched. Outside, a siren wailed faintly through the snow. Elijah finally spoke. "You heard her. Leave." Gavin's smile collapsed into something sharper. "You think you know her. You have no idea who you're protecting. Ask her why she changed her name. Ask her what she did to make all that money vanish. Ask her who really got hurt in the end." Camille's breath hitched. He was trying to unravel her again, to make her small. But this time, she didn't hide. "She's not the liar here," Elijah said quietly. Gavin stared at him. "You're in over your head, doctor. You don't know the kind of people who protect me." "Maybe not," Elijah said, stepping closer, "but I know how to protect her." For a moment, no one moved. The tension was a living thing, pulsing between them. Then Gavin's eyes darted toward Camille one last time. "This isn't over," he said softly. "You're still mine, Camille, even if you've forgotten it." "I remember everything," she replied. "That's why I'll never go back." He hesitated, then turned and left. The door slammed shut, and the sound echoed through the clinic like a gunshot. Camille's knees buckled. Elijah caught her before she hit the floor. "It's over," he murmured. But she shook her head. "No, it's not. You don't know him, he won't stop." That night, Elijah insisted on walking her home. Snow blanketed the streets in silence, the kind that made footsteps sound like confessions. Camille kept glancing behind her, half expecting the SUV to appear again. When they reached her door, Elijah said quietly, "He's dangerous." "I know. You should leave the city, start over again somewhere else." Camille looked up at him. "Running won't change what he's done. I have to face it." He hesitated. "Then you're going to need help." Her eyes softened. "I have you." Elijah exhaled slowly, nodding. "Then you have enough." She smiled faintly, but the warmth didn't last. In her chest, dread twisted tighter. Across town, in a hotel room overlooking Lake Michigan, Gavin sat by the window with a drink in his hand. His reflection stared back hollow-eyed, jittery, unraveling. He dialed his phone. "Daily," he said. "She's not scared enough. I want her scared." Frank's voice on the other end was cautious. "You told me to find her. You didn't say anything about threatening her." "Do your job," Gavin snapped. "She ruined me, and now I'll return the favor." Frank hesitated, then said quietly, "Be careful what you wish for. Some people don't stay broken." Gavin hung up without answering. 2 days later, the clinic was busier than ever. Camille worked through exhaustion, refusing to stop. She told herself that if she kept moving, she could outpace the fear pressing at the edges of her mind. But fear has a way of catching up. Around noon, a package arrived with her name scrawled across the front. Maya Rhodes. No return address. She froze, her stomach knotting. Elijah noticed. "You expecting something?" "No," she whispered. He took it gently from her hands, tore open the brown paper, and stopped. Inside was a single object, a photo frame. Inside the frame, a picture of her and Gavin, taken at a charity gala years ago. But someone had taken a knife to it, slicing the image cleanly down the middle. Camille's face remained, Gavin's was gone. Elijah's voice was low. "We should call the police." "They can't help," she said. "He's too powerful." "Then we make him powerless." She looked up. "How?" "By telling the truth." Her throat tightened. "You don't understand. The truth is poison. It kills anyone who drinks it." "Maybe," Elijah said, "but lies kill slower." She turned away, shaking. She'd run from confrontation her whole life, from her husband, her family, the hollow world of luxury that had shaped her. But she was tired of fear being the only language she spoke. That night, she didn't go home. She stayed at the clinic, writing for hours, a letter, a statement, a confession. Every word burned, but with each line she felt lighter. She titled the document, "The Cost of Silence." The next morning, she handed the envelope to Elijah. "If something happens to me," she said, "send this to the press." His brows furrowed. "Don't talk like that." "I'm not planning to die," she said quietly. "I'm planning to live freely. That just happens to be the same thing that terrifies him." He studied her face, then took the envelope. "I'll protect it. And you." Before she could thank him, the clinic doors burst open. A young volunteer stumbled in, panicked. "There's been an accident," she cried. "A car crash on 9th and Maple, a little girl and her grandmother." Camille's blood went cold. "Who?" They said, "The girl's name is Lena." The next minutes blurred into chaos. Camille and Elijah ran through the snow, sirens wailing in the distance. When they arrived, 2 cars were crumpled in the intersection. Smoke rose from the wreckage. Paramedics swarmed. Camille spotted a small, limp body on a stretcher. Lena's doll dangled from one tiny hand. "No," Camille gasped, pushing forward. "No, no, no." A paramedic stopped her. "She's alive, ma'am, but critical. Head trauma." Camille's chest tightened until she could barely breathe. She turned to Elijah, her voice breaking. "He did this. Gavin did this." Elijah shook his head. "You don't know that. I know how he works. He couldn't touch me, so he hurt someone I love." Her voice cracked on the last word, love. She hadn't realized until then how deeply that little girl had burrowed into her heart. Hours later, as Lena lay unconscious in a hospital bed, Camille sat beside her, holding her small hand. Machines beeped rhythmically, the sound both comforting and cruel. Elijah stood by the window, his reflection ghostly against the glass. "We'll find proof," he said. "We'll make him answer for this." Camille's eyes glistened. "He doesn't believe in consequences." "Then we'll teach him." She looked up, fierce and trembling. "Promise me something. If anything happens to me, finish what I started. Expose him. Don't let this become another secret buried under money." Elijah's throat tightened. "Nothing's going to happen to you. Promise me," she repeated. He nodded. "I promise." That night, Camille walked alone through the empty hospital corridor. The world outside the windows was silver with moonlight. Snow fell like ashes. She paused by the vending machine, her reflection staring back weary, determined, alive. For the first time in years, she didn't feel powerless. She felt dangerous. When she stepped outside, the wind bit through her coat. The parking lot was deserted except for one car, sleek, black, engine running. Her heart lurched. The driver's door opened. Gavin stepped out, smiling faintly. "I told you it wasn't over," he said. Camille's pulse spiked. "What did you do to her?" "Accidents happen," he said coolly. "But now you see what happens when you run." Her hand tightened around her phone. "If you hurt her again, I'll destroy you." He took a step closer. "You already tried. You took my money, my reputation, my peace. What more can you take?" "My silence," she said. "You'll never have it again." He stopped, eyes narrowing. "Careful, Camille. There's a difference between bravery and suicide." "Then I'll be standing." The words hung in the frozen air. Gavin stared at her for a long moment, then smirked. "We'll see." He got into his car and drove off, leaving her in the swirl of snow and headlights. The sound of the heart monitor split the silence like lightning. Camille sprinted down the hospital corridor, her boots striking against linoleum, breath ragged. The hall lights flickered as if the building itself was panicking. "Lena!" she gasped as she burst into the room. Nurses surrounded the small hospital bed, voices overlapping in chaos. Blood pressure dropping. "Get the crash cart. Move." Camille's eyes locked on the child's pale face. Her skin was colorless, lips trembling faintly as the nurse pressed a mask over her mouth. The machine screamed another alarm. Camille's pulse matched its frantic rhythm. Elijah rushed in seconds later, his coat half on. "What happened?" "She coded," one nurse said. "Respiratory failure, possible internal bleed. We're stabilizing." Camille stood frozen at the edge of the chaos. She wanted to scream, to rip the wires out, to take Lena and run, but her body refused to move. When the nurse finally turned off the alarm, the room fell eerily quiet. "She's stable for now," Elijah said, eyes never leaving the monitors. "But she's hanging by a thread." Camille pressed her hand to her chest. "He did this, Gavin. He warned me." Elijah turned toward her, eyes narrowing. "What do you mean, warned you?" She pulled out her phone and showed him the message. "If you send that file, the girl dies." His jaw clenched. "You think he has someone here?" "He has everyone," she said bitterly. "He's connected to hospitals, police, the media. You can't outrun money." Elijah shook his head. "You're wrong. You can't outrun money, but you can starve it." He reached for the envelope she'd given him, the one labeled, "The Cost of Silence." "We leak it anonymously. I'll send it through a network of independent journalists. They'll verify the data. He won't trace it back to you." Camille hesitated. "And if he does?" Then he'll come for me first, Elijah said. Her throat tightened. I can't let anyone else get hurt because of me. He looked at her with a strange mix of tenderness and frustration. You didn't hurt anyone, Camille. You survived them. She turned back to Lena's bed, stroking the child's hand gently. Surviving shouldn't feel this much like guilt. At sunrise, the hospital corridors were quiet again. Camille hadn't slept. She sat in the waiting area outside intensive care, staring at the floor. Her mind kept looping through fragments of her old life, the charity galas, the shallow applause, the hollow smiles. All of it built on lies she'd helped uphold. A voice interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Rhodes? She looked up. A man in a cheap suit stood before her, badge clipped to his belt. Detective Rowe, he said. Mind if I ask a few questions? Her pulse spiked. About what? The accident, he said. We have reason to believe it wasn't entirely accidental. Camille's breath caught. Do you know who did it? He hesitated. We're still gathering evidence, but there's one thing. The driver who hit the girl, he was a private contractor out of Connecticut. His employer's name isn't on file, but the payments trace back to a consulting firm owned by a familiar name, Sterling Group. The world tilted slightly. Camille gripped the armrest. Gavin, the detective studied her reaction. You know him? She forced a bitter laugh. You could say that. I was married to him. His expression hardened. Then you understand why I'm asking you to be careful. Men like that don't play fair. She nodded. They never have. Across town, Gavin Sterling sat in his hotel room watching the morning news. His face, once the golden image of political promise, now flashed across the screen beside the headline, Sterling Scandal Deepens Alleged Corruption and Missing Funds. He muted the sound, smiling faintly. Predictable, he murmured. She thinks she can use the press. Frank Daly entered, looking uneasy. You said you just wanted to scare her, Gavin. A kid almost died. Gavin didn't turn around. Almost is the key word. Daly's voice hardened. You're crossing a line. There are no lines when you're already buried, Gavin said coldly. You think I'll lose everything because my wife decided to play martyr? I built this empire. She was decoration. Frank stared at him for a long moment. You talk about her like she's an object. Maybe that's why she ran. Gavin turned, eyes icy. You're done moralizing, Frank. You work for me or you disappear with her. For the first time, Frank didn't answer. He simply left, shutting the door harder than necessary. Gavin poured himself another drink. The amber liquid shimmered in the light, calm, deceptive, just like him. Later that day, Elijah approached Camille in the hospital cafeteria. His tie was loose, his face drawn from exhaustion. We got a call from one of the reporters, he said quietly. They verified the documents. They're going public within 48 hours. Camille's spoon froze midair. 48 hours? It's the safest window. They'll cross-reference bank transfers, campaign donations, offshore accounts. It'll take time, but once it's out, there's no pulling it back. Her stomach twisted. And Gavin? He'll implode, Elijah said simply. It's what men like him do when they realize control isn't a weapon anymore. She wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe the truth could finally win, but when she walked back toward Lena's room, the little girl's fragile breathing reminded her that innocence was always collateral damage. That night, Camille sat by the hospital window watching snowflakes dissolve against the glass. Her phone buzzed. A new message. You think the world will believe you? They believed me first. Her throat tightened. She typed back, hands shaking. You've already lost, Gavin. This ends now. No reply. Only the reflection of her own trembling fingers against the dim light. The next morning, she woke to the sound of shouting in the hallway. Elijah burst into the room holding a newspaper. It's out, he said, eyes blazing. Camille took the paper. The headline screamed in bold letters, Sterling Empire Crumbles, Leaked Files Reveal Embezzlement and Abuse. Photos of Gavin and Margaret filled the page, lavish parties, political fundraisers, smiling facades collapsing under the weight of truth. Camille's knees went weak. It's real, she whispered. They actually printed it. Elijah nodded. Every outlet's running it. It's over. But it wasn't. Because that same hour, news vans gathered outside the hospital. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing. Mrs. Sterling, is it true you leaked the documents? Are you in hiding? Did your husband threaten the child in your care? Camille blinked, under the onslaught of microphones and lights. "No comment," she said, forcing herself through the crowd. Elijah shielded her, guiding her back inside. He slammed the door shut behind them. "They're turning it into a circus." "That's what he wanted," Camille said quietly. "He wants to drown me in noise before the truth can breathe." By evening, her face was everywhere. News feeds, social media, tabloid covers. The missing heiress who brought down her husband. Some called her brave, others called her insane. But the message that arrived that night stripped away the illusion of victory. It was a photo Lena's hospital room, taken from outside the window. The caption read, "You can't protect everyone." Camille's vision blurred with panic. She ran to the window, scanning the dark street below, but saw only shadows. Elijah found her minutes later, gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles were white. "He's watching," she whispered. "He's here." He checked the hallway, then pulled her into an empty supply room. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "We'll move Lena tonight. I'll call the social worker, get her into a secure facility until this blows over." Camille shook her head. "No, she's not a file to relocate. She's a child. He won't stop until he breaks me." "Then let him try," Elijah said, "but he'll have to go through me first." Her eyes glistened. "That's what I'm afraid of." Outside, the world turned against Gavin Sterling. His accounts froze, his mother's properties were seized, senators withdrew support. He tried to give interviews, but every camera caught the crack in his voice, the sweat on his forehead. "Those files were manipulated," he insisted to the press. "This is a smear campaign orchestrated by a woman suffering from delusion." But public sympathy had shifted. The polished predator had become the pariah. In his hotel suite, Gavin threw a glass at the wall, shattering it into glittering fragments. "She thinks she won," he hissed. Margaret sat silently across from him. She looked older, her pearls gone, her face lined with regret. "Let it go, Gavin," she said softly. "You're finished. Don't drag us further down." He turned to her, eyes wild. "You made me this, you and Father and your perfect lies. Don't pretend you're innocent." Margaret's voice trembled. "You can still stop. You can still walk away." Gavin laughed, a hollow, dangerous sound. "No, I don't walk away. I take everything." He picked up his coat and stormed out, leaving her alone with the echoes of her own mistakes. At the hospital, Camille sat by Lena's bed, reading softly from a children's book. The girl's eyes fluttered open briefly. "You sound tired," she whispered. Camille smiled weakly. "I'm just happy you're awake." Lena's fingers curled around hers. "You're not scared anymore," the girl murmured. Camille hesitated, then nodded. "No, not anymore." But she was lying not to Lena, but to herself. Fear had just changed shape. Elijah entered quietly. "They've arranged to move her to a safer ward tonight. I'll ride with her." Camille's voice dropped. "I'll meet you there. I need to stop by the clinic first. There's something I have to do." "What?" She glanced at the window, where faint snow was falling again. "End this." The drive to the clinic felt endless. The city lights blurred through the windshield. Camille parked behind the building, her hands trembling as she reached into her bag for the flash drive, the original copy of The Cost of Silence. She'd kept one version hidden, untouched, encrypted with details no journalist had seen yet. She wanted to destroy it, to end the war by erasing its weapon. But when she entered the dark clinic, she wasn't alone. A figure stepped from the shadows. "Going somewhere?" Gavin's voice asked softly. Her breath caught. He looked, unhinged eyes bloodshot, hair disheveled, the calm mask gone. "How did you—" "I never lost you," he said. "You left breadcrumbs everywhere. It was only a matter of time." He stepped closer. "You cost me everything. My name, my career, my life. But you'll pay in silence." Camille backed away, hands searching for anything to use as defense. Her fingers brushed against a metal tray. "You won't touch that child again." He laughed, low and cruel. "That child doesn't matter. You do." Suddenly, headlights flashed through the clinic window, a car pulling into the alley. "Elijah." Gavin turned sharply toward the door. Camille saw her chance. She lunged, grabbing the flash drive from the table and bolting toward the rear exit. Gavin caught her wrist, yanking her backward. "Camille!" Elijah's voice echoed from the front. The struggle was violent and clumsy. Gavin's grip tightened around her arm. "You think the world will remember you as a hero?" he snarled. "They'll call you crazy, a fraud." Camille stared straight into his eyes. "Then let them. At least they'll remember I fought back. She drove her knee into his ribs. He stumbled, cursing. She broke free, running toward the alley. Elijah appeared just as she reached the door, flashlight in hand. "Go," he shouted. Behind them, Gavin roared and lunged forward. A sharp crack echoed metal against bone. Someone fell. Camille turned, breathless. "Elijah?" But the darkness swallowed his answer. The sound of sirens grew louder, slicing through the cold air like a blade. Camille stared down at Gavin's open eyes, wide and wild under the red-blue strobe. For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe. She'd seen that look before, the look of a man who refused to die because control was all he'd ever worshipped. "Elijah," she whispered, "he's still conscious." Elijah's hands trembled as he dropped the metal pipe. "We have to call for help." Camille's voice shook. "If we do, they'll arrest you. He'll twist it. He'll make them believe you attacked him unprovoked." "He was attacking you," Elijah said, anger rising in his chest. "There are witnesses at the hospital, at the clinic. There's also his money," she cut in. "His lawyers, his mother. They'll bury you before sunrise." Gavin coughed, a weak, broken laugh escaping his lips. "She's right, doctor. You'll both go down for this." Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth as he smirked. "Funny, isn't it? You risked everything for her, and she'll still destroy you." Elijah took a step back, chest heaving. Camille crouched beside Gavin, eyes burning with fury and disbelief. "You can't help yourself, can you? Even now, half dead, you have to own the last word." He looked up at her, voice raspy. "It's not about words, it's about who the world believes." The flashing lights drew closer. Camille turned to Elijah. "Go, now, take the back alley and disappear." He shook his head violently. "I'm not leaving you." "Please," she said, gripping his sleeve. "If you stay, they'll use this against us. You have a chance to rebuild. I don't." "Elijah," a police siren boomed closer, echoing through the narrow street. He looked at her, the fear, the fire, the history, and then at the man bleeding on the ground. Finally, he nodded, his voice breaking. "I'll find you." Camilla's eyes glistened. "You already did." He slipped away into the darkness just as the first police car screeched into the alley. Camille raised her hands slowly as two officers jumped out, guns drawn. "Ma'am, step back," one shouted. "He's hurt," she said, her voice steady but hollow. One of the officers knelt beside Gavin. "We need an ambulance now." Another officer turned toward her. "What happened?" She hesitated, the lie forming in her throat before she could stop it. "He followed me here, tried to attack me. I hit him to defend myself." The officer's brow furrowed. "With what?" She glanced at the pipe on the ground. "That." The second officer exchanged a look with his partner. "Ma'am, we'll need to take you in for questioning." Camille nodded numbly, her gaze fixed on Gavin as the paramedics loaded him onto a stretcher. His eyes fluttered open once more, meeting hers with a faint, mocking smile. "This isn't over," he whispered, barely audible. And she knew deep down that he was right. The police station smelled of coffee and old paperwork. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, Camille sat across from a detective, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a voice that carried no warmth. "Mrs. Sterling," the detective began, "or do you prefer Miss Rhodes?" Camille folded her hands in her lap. "Maya Rhodes is fine." The detective's pen scratched against her notepad. "You claim your husband attacked you. Any witnesses?" Camille shook her head. "No, we were alone." "And the weapon?" He grabbed it first. Camille lied smoothly. "I wrestled it away." The detective paused, studying her face. "You know your husband is a public figure. This will get messy." Camille's lips tightened. "It's already messy." The detective leaned back. "I've seen women like you before. You think confessing means freedom. But freedom isn't in words, it's in what you're willing to lose." Camille met her gaze, unflinching. "Then I've already lost enough." For a long moment, the detective said nothing. Then she closed the folder. "You can go for now, but don't leave the city. He's in critical condition. If he dies, this becomes homicide." Camille's breath caught, but she nodded. Understood. As she stepped into the gray morning light outside the station, she realized that freedom was no longer a destination, it was a sentence, one she'd chosen to serve alone. Across town, in a dim hospital room, Gavin Sterling lay unconscious. Tubes snaked from his arms, machines beeped with mechanical indifference. Margaret sat beside him, her hands clasped tight. The television above the bed replayed clips of his downfall. Corruption, abuse, violence, the Sterling legacy collapses. She turned it off, her reflection flickering on the black screen. "You've destroyed everything," she whispered to his motionless face. "And for what? Pride?" For the first time, her voice trembled not with anger, but with sorrow. "He loved you once," a nurse said gently from the doorway. Margaret's eyes hardened. No, he loved control, and that's what killed him. But she was wrong. Gavin wasn't dead, not yet. Deep inside his mind, something darker than guilt stirred awake. Meanwhile, Camille returned to Ruth Delaney's house to pack her things. The old woman stood by the kitchen window, arms crossed. "You've brought trouble, child," Ruth said quietly. Camille paused. "I didn't mean to." "Meaning doesn't clean blood off concrete." Ruth turned to face her, eyes sharp. "I've seen this story too many times. Men like him don't fall, they pull everyone down with them." Camille swallowed hard. "Then maybe it's time someone let them fall alone." Ruth watched her for a long moment before nodding. "Then go, before the storm hits again." Camille slung the bag over her shoulder. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me," Ruth said. "Just survive. That's payment enough." That night, Camille found herself back at the clinic, sitting in the dark. The silence felt different now, heavier, knowing. Her phone buzzed on the table, an unknown number again. "He's awake." She froze, her stomach churned. Moments later, another text. "He's asking for you." Her instinct screamed to run, to vanish before he could twist the truth again. But another voice inside, colder, stronger, whispered, "End it." She grabbed her coat and walked out into the snow. When she entered Gavin's hospital room, the world seemed to shrink. The beeping machines, the sterile air, the pale light filtering through half-closed blinds, all of it wrapped around her like a memory she didn't want. He looked weaker, older, but when his eyes met hers, the venom was alive again. "You came," he rasped. "I had to see it for myself," she said. "The man who can survive his own destruction." He chuckled faintly, then winced. "You should have stayed gone, now they'll come for you too." "They already have," she said, "and I'm still standing." He studied her face. "You think you've won because you told the truth? The truth doesn't set you free, Camille. It isolates you. Makes you untouchable, unlovable." She took a step closer. "I don't need to be loved, I just need to be heard." He smiled slow, poisonous. "Then listen closely. You think those files ruined me? They were just the surface. You never saw what lies beneath." Her heart skipped. "What are you talking about?" "There's more," he whispered. "Something bigger than us. The donations, the charity money, it wasn't mine to take. It belonged to people you'll wish you'd never met." Camille's pulse quickened. "Who?" Gavin leaned closer, his voice barely a breath. "Look in the second account under my name, the one ending in 819. You'll see where the real power lives." She stared at him, trying to decide whether it was truth or manipulation. "Why tell me?" she asked finally. He smirked. "Because if I burn, I'm taking you with me." His hand gripped hers suddenly, weak but fierce. "You'll never outrun this, Camille. You exposed a shadow, and shadows don't die, they multiply." She yanked her hand free, breath shaking. "You've built your whole life on fear. I'm done living in it." He laughed again, a hollow sound that turned into a cough. "We'll see who the world believes this time." Camille turned to leave, her body trembling. Behind her, his voice followed like a curse. "You opened a door, darling. Now walk through it if you dare." Outside the hospital, the air was sharp and freezing. Camille leaned against a street lamp, trying to steady her breath. She could still feel his hand on her skin, still hear his words echoing. She pulled out her phone and dialed Elijah. "I need your help," she said, voice low. "There's another account. Something bigger than the embezzlement. I have to see it." He hesitated. "Camille, no. You've done enough. Let the police handle it." "They can't. This isn't just corruption, it's something else. Something dangerous." There was a pause. Then Elijah sighed. "All right. But if we do this, we do it together." "Together," she repeated. As she ended the call, snow began to fall again, heavy and unrelenting, like the sky itself was trying to erase her footsteps. Later that night, Camille and Elijah met in the clinic's back office. The computers buzzed quietly as he pulled up encrypted files. "Account ending in 819, Camille said. "That's what he told me." Elijah typed quickly, his fingers steady despite the tension. When the file opened, Camille felt her stomach drop. The ledger wasn't just campaign money, it was a list of payments to private contractors, lobbyists, and offshore shell companies. But beneath those names were darker entries, coded transfers linked to defense procurement, medical trials, and a name she hadn't seen in years: Margaret Sterling. Her voice trembled. His mother? Elijah's eyes widened. She was part of it. The realization hit her like ice water. Gavin wasn't the only monster, he was the heir to one. A low hum filled the air, the sound of the clinic's old security system rebooting. The screen flickered. Then, suddenly, a new message appeared on the monitor. "Stop digging, or you'll join him." The power cut out. The room plunged into darkness. The darkness inside the clinic felt alive. The hum of the dead computer faded into silence, replaced by the distant groan of wind scraping against broken windows. Camille stood frozen, the flash drive clutched so tightly in her hand it left a dent in her skin. Elijah's shadow shifted beside her, his breathing shallow. "Whoever that was," he whispered, "they've been watching us for a long time." Camille's pulse raced. It's not just about Gavin anymore. This is something deeper, something buried under his name. Elijah nodded slowly. "Then we dig, but smart. Whatever's on that account could destroy more than one man." She turned to face him, her voice steady but trembling at the edges. "If we stop now, they win. If we keep going, they'll come for us." He met her eyes. "Then let them come." For the first time since she fled Greenwich, Camille felt no fear in those words, only resolve. They moved to the back office, using flashlights to illuminate the space. Elijah connected the laptop to a backup generator, the machine sputtering before its blue light returned. Camille inserted the flash drive and exhaled. "Let's finish this." The screen filled with data, a maze of numbers, transfers, and coded aliases. Elijah scrolled through them, his brow furrowed. "This isn't just campaign fraud, these are medical research grants, government contracts, defense budgets rerouted into private hands." Camille leaned closer. "What kind of research?" He clicked into one of the encrypted folders. Inside were scanned documents, memos, stamped confidential detailing experiments on low-income patients, illegal pharmaceutical testing, and falsified death certificates. Camille's throat tightened. They were testing drugs on the poor. Elijah's voice hardened. "Not just testing, covering it up. These people weren't patients, they were numbers." She scrolled through the files and stopped on one page, a ledger with signatures at the bottom. Her eyes widened. "That's my signature." Elijah looked at her in disbelief. "What?" She pointed at the document. "From one of Gavin's charity events, he had me sign checks, transfer funds for outreach. I thought it was donations. He used my name to finance this." The realization hit like a knife twisting inside her. All this time, I wasn't his victim, I was his cover. Elijah took her hand gently. "You didn't know. But that doesn't matter," she whispered. "If this leaks, they'll think I was part of it." He looked at her, voice low but firm. "Then we make them hear the truth before they rewrite it." Camille's mind swirled with images. The lavish galas, the journalists shaking hands with Gavin, the cameras capturing her fake smiles. Every piece of her old life now looked like a crime scene. She turned back to the screen. "We expose everything, all of it, even if it means taking myself down." Elijah hesitated. "Camille, if you release this, they won't just attack your reputation, they'll erase you. People who know the system don't fight it, they disappear." She gave a faint, tragic smile. "Then disappearing is the price of being real." Outside, snow fell heavier, thickening into a blizzard. The city lights blurred under the storm, turning South Chicago into a maze of white noise and shadow. Elijah printed the files and locked them into a metal case. "We'll split it half with me, half with you. If one of us gets caught, the other finishes the job." Camille nodded. "We send it to every major outlet, the Washington Post, the Guardian, independent media." He paused. "And what about the police?" "They're compromised," she said flatly. "They always are." As they packed up, Camille glanced at the old wall clock. 3:12 a.m. Time seemed suspended, caught between two worlds, the one she'd escaped and the one she hadn't yet survived. Then came the sound. A thud outside, then another. Elijah froze. "Someone's here." He turned off the flashlight, plunging the room back into darkness. Through the narrow window, headlights flared in the distance, 2 cars pulling up to the curb, engines idling. Camille whispered, "We have to go." They slipped out the back door into the snow, cutting through the alley behind the clinic. Their breath fogged the air, boots crunching softly. The wind howled like a warning. Halfway down the block, a voice cut through the night. "Camille." She spun around and her blood ran cold. Margaret Sterling stood at the alley's end, wrapped in a long black coat, her silver hair glinting in the streetlight. "Mother Sterling," Camille said, her tone bitter. "I should have known you'd clean up his mess." Margaret's lips curved into a faint smile. "It was never his mess, dear. You always misunderstood the game." Elijah stepped forward. "We have proof. Everything, the money, the trials, your involvement." Margaret's expression didn't change. Proof is meaningless when no one's left to read it. 2 men stepped from behind her, armed and silent. Camille instinctively stepped closer to Elijah. "You won't get away with this," she said. Margaret sighed softly, as though speaking to a child. "You think this is about getting away. It's about survival. My son was reckless, but he was loyal. He carried the family torch. You extinguished it." Camille's anger flared. "You experimented on people. Children died because of you." Margaret's eyes hardened. "And what of it? The world runs on the sacrifices of the invisible. You should know you were one of them once." Elijah's hand closed around Camille's wrist. "We need to go, now." They bolted down the alley as the men moved forward. A gunshot cracked the air. The bullet shattered a window beside them. Camille ducked behind a dumpster, heart hammering. "Elijah," she hissed. "I'm here," he called, crouched behind a car. "Keep moving." Snow mixed with smoke as another shot rang out, the alley filled with chaos, shouts, footsteps, the metallic echo of violence. Camille grabbed a shard of glass from the ground, her palms bleeding as she clutched it. She waited until the footsteps grew closer, then swung as a figure rounded the corner. The glass sliced skin. The man dropped his gun, cursing. Elijah tackled him, knocking him into the snow. "Run!" Elijah yelled. Camille sprinted, the flash drive burning in her pocket. The blizzard swallowed everything's sound, sight, thought. When she finally reached the street, a black SUV skidded around the corner, blocking her path. The door opened. Margaret stepped out. "You've become quite the inconvenience," the older woman said calmly. "I admired you once. You had grace, now you're just noise." Camille's breath came in shallow bursts. "Then maybe it's time the noise got louder." Margaret raised her hand, not with a gun, but with a phone. She pressed a button. Across the street, the clinic's windows exploded into flame. Camille screamed, "Elijah!" The explosion rippled through the block, fire lighting up the storm like dawn from hell. Smoke swallowed the night, choking the air. Camille ran toward the inferno, ignoring Margaret's shouts. "Elijah!" she cried again, voice raw. Through the flames, she saw him struggling to crawl from the wreckage, coughing, eyes red with smoke. She reached for him, their hands almost touching before a blast of heat forced her back. The roof caved in. "Elijah!" The sound that left her throat was not a scream, but something deeper, a sound torn from the soul. Margaret watched from across the street, her face illuminated by the fire. "You should have stayed hidden," she said quietly. "Now the truth dies with him." Camille turned, her face streaked with soot and tears. "You think fire erases truth? It just burns it into memory." Margaret's gaze lingered, cold and unmoved. "Then remember this." She gestured to one of her men. Before Camille could react, a blow struck her temple. The world spun lights, snow, fire, and then blackness swallowed everything. When she woke, the air was still. The fire was gone. She lay on a cold concrete floor, wrists bound. The smell of damp and gasoline filled her lungs. A voice echoed through the darkness. "Welcome back." Camille blinked, her vision swimming. Margaret stood before her, immaculate even in ruin. "You've caused me quite a headache," Margaret said, pacing slowly. "But I'll make you a deal. Tell me where the files are, and you live." Camille's lips cracked into a faint smile. "You'll have to kill me then, because the files don't die with me." Margaret tilted her head. "You're bluffing." Camille shook her head. "You think Elijah was the only one? You think I'd risk everything without backup?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Margaret's eyes. "Who else has them?" Camille's voice hardened. Every name you paid to bury. The older woman's smile faltered. From outside, faint sirens began to wail again, closer this time. Margaret's expression shifted from control to rage. You fool, you've doomed us all. Camille met her gaze, blood trickling down her temple. No, Margaret, you doomed yourself the moment you mistook silence for loyalty. Margaret turned sharply to her men. End it now. They stepped forward, but before the first shot fired, the door burst open. Floodlights cut through the dark. Police! Drop your weapons! Chaos exploded, shouting, gunfire, the sound of boots. Margaret screamed as her men scattered. Camille ducked behind a crate, heart pounding. When the smoke cleared, she heard a familiar voice. Camille. She turned Elijah, limping, alive, his face streaked with soot. Elijah, she whispered, disbelief and relief colliding. He reached for her, pulling her to her feet. Come on, it's over. But she hesitated. Behind them, Margaret lay pinned to the floor by an officer, her face pale, eyes burning with something between hatred and fear. You think this ends with me? Margaret spat. You have no idea how deep it goes. Elijah pulled Camille toward the exit. Let her talk to the walls. They stepped into the cold night. The snow had stopped, leaving only smoke and ash swirling through the air. Camille looked up at the faint glow of dawn breaking through the haze. It's over, she whispered. But as they walked toward the waiting ambulance, Elijah's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and froze. Camille noticed. What is it? He handed her the phone silently. It was a message from an unknown number. You really think you won? The account wasn't the last one. Attached was a single image, a newborn baby in an incubator, and beneath it 3 words. Project Renewal active. Camille's breath caught in her throat. Oh my God. Elijah looked at her, his face pale. They're still running the trials. Camille turned toward the horizon, the wind cutting through her hair like knives. The fire behind her smoldered, but ahead something darker waited. Her voice was barely a whisper. Then we're not done. The train vanished into the storm, leaving behind only a low, metallic echo that hung in the frozen air like an unanswered prayer. Camille stood on the platform, wind tearing through her coat, her fingers bleeding where she'd gripped the railing too hard. She was shaking from cold, from pain, from the knowledge that everything she'd lived for had just gone into motion without her. Elijah was gone. The data was gone. The truth was no longer hers to guard. She looked down at her trembling hands, as if expecting to see his blood there, but all she saw was snow melting on her palms, red dissolving into white purity and sin blurring into one. For the first time, she whispered his name, not as a plea, but as a benediction. Elijah, thank you. The wind swallowed the words, carrying them into the endless white horizon. 3 days later, Camille found herself hundreds of miles away in Milwaukee, in a small motel off a forgotten highway. The TV flickered dimly in the corner, the news anchors talking over each other. Words like corruption, cover-up, illegal testing, and missing heiress filled the air like static. Her story had finally detonated. The files had reached the public servers. Independent journalists had confirmed the details. Project Renewal, the covert biomedical initiative funded by Sterling money, was real. It had been hidden under layers of charity fronts and defense grants, and the images now flooding the internet of test subjects, stolen children, secret hospital wings were too horrific to deny. But the world, as always, reacted with noise. Half believed it. Half didn't. Everyone wanted a villain, but no one wanted a mirror. Camille watched the footage in silence, her face occasionally appearing in grainy photos from past galas, now contrasted with a mugshot from the night of Gavin's arrest. The anchors spoke her name with a strange reverence, half sympathy, half suspicion. Camille Rhodes, formerly Sterling, has not been seen since the data breach, one said. Federal agencies are investigating her possible involvement. She muted the TV. The quiet that followed felt heavier than any sound. Her wound had begun to close, but her body still ached with exhaustion. The motel smelled of old smoke and mildew. She sat at the table, tracing circles on a napkin with her pen, her thoughts looping endlessly. She had unleashed the truth, but at what cost? Elijah was dead. Margaret had vanished. Gavin's empire was ashes, and the machine behind them, all the one that fed on silence and power, had merely shifted shape. The phone on the nightstand rang. Camille froze. No one had this number. She picked it up. Hello? Static filled the line, followed by a woman's voice. Soft, old, familiar. Camille? Her breath caught. Ruth? It's me, the old woman said. You need to see something. What? Ruth hesitated. The news isn't showing all of it. They found something else. A facility. Camille's pulse quickened. Where? North side of Chicago. Abandoned warehouse near the docks. They're moving people out now, patients. Children, some alive, some... Ruth's voice cracked. You were right. It never stopped. Camille closed her eyes, a single tear escaping. I'm coming. Don't, Ruth said firmly. It's dangerous. Let the reporters. They'll sanitize it. They'll call it a tragedy, not a crime, Camille interrupted. This time I need to see it with my own eyes. Ruth sighed on the other end. Then God go with you, child. God had his chance, Camille said softly. Now it's mine. The docks were deserted when she arrived that night. The city skyline glimmered far away, cold and unreachable. The wind smelled of salt and iron. Camille wore a black coat, hood pulled low. She parked the stolen sedan behind a stack of rusted containers and approached the warehouse. The metal doors were half open, creaking with each gust of wind. She slipped inside. The stench hit first antiseptic, oil, and something far worse. Then the faint hum of generators. Down a narrow hallway, light spilled from a cracked door. She moved closer, her footsteps muffled by dust. Voices drifted from inside, low, urgent, male. Burn everything by dawn. The files are already out. Doesn't matter. They have backups. They always have backups. Camille's breath hitched. She recognized one of the voices. Gavin. She peered through the crack in the door. He was alive barely. A bandage covered half his face, his arm in a sling, but he was standing, pacing, alive enough to keep scheming. You were supposed to be dead, she whispered under her breath. Beside him stood a man she didn't recognize, tall, clean-cut, in a government-issued parka. Director Hale, Gavin said bitterly. You promised protection. Hale's tone was flat. Protection comes at a price. You delivered the trial data. You'll be compensated. You call this compensation? Gavin gestured to his wounds. My name's ruined. My wife destroyed me. Your wife saved you, Hale interrupted. Without her, the distraction wouldn't have worked. The leak drew attention away from Renewal North. Camille's stomach dropped. Renewal North. Gavin frowned. You mean there's another? Don't ask questions you don't want answers to, Hale said. Just sign the release and disappear. I want to see her, Gavin said suddenly. Camille, Hale's face hardened. She's not your concern. She's my wife, Gavin snapped, and she owes me everything. Camille couldn't stop herself. A small sound escaped her throat. The men turned toward the door. Did you hear that? Hale said. Camille bolted. She ran down the hallway, footsteps echoing. Behind her, shouts erupted. She's here. Gunfire followed. The first bullet hit a pipe beside her head. Steam burst out, clouding the corridor. She stumbled through the haze, clutching the flash drive still around her neck. At the far end, she saw an exit sign glowing faintly red. She sprinted toward it, but something caught her ankle. Gavin. He had tackled her from behind, his face twisted with rage. You just can't die quietly, can you? He snarled, dragging her back. You destroyed everything, and you still want to play martyr. Camille fought back, kicking, clawing. You don't get to call me that. He slammed her against the wall. You think this ends with your leak? You think truth changes anything? The world doesn't want truth, Camille. It wants entertainment. Blood filled her mouth. Then let me give them a better ending. She shoved him hard. He staggered back right into a broken electrical box. Sparks flew. The current caught instantly. Gavin screamed as fire burst along the wall, racing up the cables like veins of light. Camille stumbled backward, horrified, as his body convulsed once, then went still. The fire spread. Alarms blared. She turned and ran, smoke chasing her like a living thing. Outside, she collapsed onto the icy pavement, gasping. The warehouse burned behind her, the flames reflected in her tear-filled eyes. For a moment, she almost laughed, not from joy, but from disbelief. It was over. Or so she thought. 2 hours later, Camille sat in the back of an ambulance. Paramedics bandaged her arm, muttering to each other about shock and exposure. Police officers swarmed the docks. Reporters arrived in vans, cameras flashing. She told them nothing. As dawn rose, she walked away from the chaos and found herself standing by the water's edge. The smoke curled upward, staining the morning sky. She took out the flash drive from around her neck. It was cracked, the casing melted, but still intact. "Everything ends," she murmured, "but not the truth." She threw it into the lake. The ripples spread outward, catching the sunlight like tiny shards of hope. Behind her, a voice spoke softly. "You shouldn't have come back." Camille turned. Margaret Sterling stood a few feet away, wrapped in black. Her hair had gone entirely gray, but her eyes burned with the same cold fire. "I thought you were dead," Camille said. "Not yet," Margaret replied. "You took my son, my legacy. What's left for me to lose?" "Your soul," Camille said. Margaret smiled faintly. "I sold that a long time ago." They stared at each other, two women carved by the same fire, standing on opposite sides of survival. Then Margaret reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope. "He left this for you," she said, "before the fire." Camille hesitated, then took it. Inside was a single photograph, a newborn baby in an incubator, labeled Renewal North, subject 001. Margaret's voice broke. "They're still alive, Camille. The children, they moved them before the fire." Camille's hands trembled. "Where?" Margaret looked past her, toward the horizon. "I don't know, but someone does. And they'll come for you." Camille's throat tightened. "Then I'll find them first." Margaret stepped closer, her eyes wet for the first time. "You can't save them all." Camille's voice was barely a whisper. "Maybe not, but I can make sure they're seen." Margaret studied her for a long moment, then turned to leave. "You're your own kind of monster, Camille. Pray you never become mine." When she was gone, Camille sank to her knees. The photograph fluttered in her hands. The baby's tiny hand was reaching upward as if for light. Later that day, Camille returned to Chicago. The story had exploded. Project Renewal was front-page news worldwide. Whistleblowers emerged. Arrests began. Margaret Sterling's name was among the indicted. But what gripped the nation most was a video, an anonymous confession uploaded to every major news outlet. Camille recognized the voice immediately. It was Elijah's, recorded weeks before his death. "If you're watching this, it means the truth survived us," he said. "Every name, every account, every experiment, it's out there now. Don't let it fade, because justice isn't born from law, it's born from memory." Camille watched in silence, tears sliding down her face. When the video ended, she whispered, "You did it." Months passed. The Maya Foundation, rebuilt from the ashes, opened its doors again, this time under a new name, the Renewal Project. It was no longer a secret refuge. It was a monument to those who couldn't speak for themselves. Camille worked quietly in the background, avoiding cameras, avoiding fame. She no longer wanted to be seen, only to see. Every week, she received letters from survivors, from mothers, from people who had believed her when the world didn't. Each one began the same way. "You made us visible." One evening, as the sun set over the foundation garden, Camille stood beneath a young almond tree planted in Elijah's memory. The branches were beginning to bloom despite the cold. She smiled faintly. For the first time in years, she felt still. Then a child's voice broke the silence. "Miss Camille?" She turned. A little girl stood there, holding a folded envelope. Her dark eyes were wide, her hair tied with a red string. "Someone left this for you," the girl said. Camille took it gently. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, precise. She opened it. Inside was a single line. "You found the truth. Now find us." And below it, coordinates. Camille looked toward the fading horizon, the red sky reflected in her eyes. "Not yet," she whispered. "It's not over yet." The wind carried her words into the distance, toward a world still trembling between shadow and light.